Diontae Johnson speaks for the first time as a member of the Baltimore Ravens, and he is happy to be with a new team. We talk about everything he had to say, plus Marcus Williams and that drama takes another turn. All that and more coming up on a crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day, free and available for you. All podcasting platforms, that includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 9,000 subscribers over there. It's been awesome seeing that community grow, also in audio form, but awesome to see that community grow. You can follow along, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts over there. Bring you 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Today's crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Ravens is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Big crossover Thursday episode here today on the show. We'll be talking with Sayre Bedinger of Locked On Broncos about the biggest matchups in that game, key storylines, keys to victory, and a lot more. But a couple of Ravens notes before we get into that. Diontae Johnson obviously acquired from Carolina yesterday for Baltimore in exchange for a 5th-round pick, a 6th, also coming back to Baltimore. He's already in Baltimore, already practicing with the team. First day of practice yesterday on Wednesday. Spoke to the media after practice, and man, you could tell he's excited to be with a new franchise, on a contender. Said that he's going to be willing to do anything the team asks him to do. Said that right now he's preparing, the Z, the F role. So what I take from that is he, going to be playing everywhere. On the outside, you can put him in the slot. Also talked about being a return guy. He got some reps there at practice on Wednesday. So I'm sure we're going to see him there because Baltimore right now essentially has gotten a big fat 0 from their return game this season. Hasn't been good. So maybe Diontae can help spark that. But, said that he's still getting acclimated to everything and is excited to be on the Ravens side of those Ravens-Steelers rivalries. Obviously, Diontae spent the first handful of his career, those years in Pittsburgh. So he was asked about it. He was kind of laughing the whole way through. I think he certainly, he has that one circled on his calendar for sure. Talked about the AFC North football, guys tackling, the effort, and all that. So a lot of awesome insight from Diontae Johnson. Again, certainly seems to be happy. There's a video, a clip going around of him apparently being on the phone with, I think it's Eric DeCosta. I don't know exactly who it is, but apparently, he's saying, I'm going to show you when talking about going to Baltimore. So again, guy going from a not so great situation to a great situation. Diontae hasn't really played with a ton of great quarterbacks over the course of his career. So now he plays with a 2-time, maybe soon to be 3-time MVP. So that's one part. And then the other part of the Ravens notes, well, actually, we can get to the injuries. Lamar Jackson did not practice on Wednesday. On the injury report, it's listed as a back and a knee issue, but John Harbaugh clarified that it's a rest day, and it makes sense. The Ravens have a quick turnaround after this game on Sunday. Thursday night, they obviously play Cincinnati at home, so that's something that, it makes sense. I'm sure Lamar's sore. I'm not looking into that, though. I'm not concerned. I know there's some narratives out there. Oh, Lamar's injured. No, John Harbaugh, again, very clearly clarified it was a rest day, so we'll go with that for now, and, I'm not necessarily reading too far into that. Now, in terms of the Marcus Williams situation, John Harbaugh said that Marcus Williams had a great practice on Wednesday. Said he's excited for Marcus, kind of continuing that. But in the locker room, Marcus Williams denied a media request or just denied requests for interviews. So just continuing these twists and turns here, obviously, I'm sure the message for Baltimore has been they're going to keep it internal. Obviously, that goes for the coaching staff and obviously probably for Marcus as well. Look, based off of these comments, I'd probably assume he's going to play this weekend, but we don't really know what's going on there. So, again, we're kind of left in the dark and trying to fit pieces together, but there are no pieces to fit together because we don't know what's going on. So, it starts out as, he's, just playing poorly, and all of a sudden he's active but not playing, and then Harbaugh says it's internal and it's personnel, and then now he's having great practice, and now Williams isn't speaking to the media. So just ups and downs throughout the whole situation. But again, you don't want to have a situation like this on any team. You don't want any distractions. Hopefully it's not that and doesn't turn into one if it isn't right now. So Without any further ado, we're going to dive into our crossover Thursday, talking about that big Week 9 upcoming matchup with the Ravens and the Denver Broncos with Sayre Bedinger of Locked On Broncos. Sayre, we have an absolute awesome matchup on the horizon for these two teams. The Ravens coming off of a tough loss to the Cleveland Browns in Week 8, hoping to bounce back at home. And Denver's having a heck of a season so far with that 5-3 record. I think better than a lot of people's expectations for the team going into the season. And I know maybe going into 2024, we were kind of looking at this and saying, oh, okay, this is probably going to be an easy Ravens win. Like, what's Denver going to do this season? Well, you got a top-ranked defense in the Denver Broncos. You got a top-ranked offense in the Baltimore Ravens. Man, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And as always, Kevin, it's great to get to you and I are almost like co-hosts in a way at this point. I feel like we do an episode every year. We always talk on Locked On NFL. So good stuff. But looking forward to this matchup. I think you and I kind of chatted even before the season. We're maybe penciling this game in as a win for the Ravens based on kind of the trajectory for the Broncos or the expectations for the Broncos. But it's interesting how just when the NFL plays out the way that it does, both of these teams sitting here at 5-3, although the optics of both of these teams very, very different. Of course, I think the Ravens are viewed as largely a legitimate contender, like a legitimate threat to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC to represent in the Super Bowl, while as the Broncos are kind of, and I heard it said, or somebody commented on one of our shows, like Broncos are kind of playing with house money a little bit right now, which kind of does feel like the case. You got Bo Nix developing. You're kind of having your cake and eat it too by winning games while the quarterback develops and the defense playing better than anyone expected. It's been a fun season for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, for sure. And again, you got a young quarterback over there in Bo Nix who is still trying to prove himself, and obviously an MVP candidate in Lamar Jackson over on the Ravens side. But let's start with Denver, Sayre, because with them being the away team, obviously coming in to Baltimore, I mentioned Bo Nix. I know that he has had some ups and he's had some downs this season, as to be expected with any rookie quarterback. But on the offensive side of the ball for the Broncos, what's the biggest storyline heading into this week?
Well, it really is going to be whether or not Bo Nix puts up the same type of performance that we saw against Carolina in Baltimore, right? And I think that's obviously a little unfair to expect of the rookie quarterback. But at the same time, you know, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, well, Bo Nix hasn't really played any real defenses yet, which I kind of take issue with based on who the Broncos played, when they played them, things like that. But I mean, it's definitely going to be different than Carolina. I think we can all admit, even though Ravens are 26th in scoring defense right now, it's a different ball game when you go to Baltimore, playing in a stadium that's very hard historically to get a win for anybody, much less a team with a rookie quarterback. So it's going to require a ton of great preparation on Bo Nix's part to do exactly what he did against the Panthers, which was distribute the ball extremely well and put the ball on target and on time. The Broncos offensive line did a great job protecting for him. They're really scheming things up well in the running game, which is creating a lot of opportunities for run action, play action, things like that. And Bo has really improved over the course of this last month, which I think is evidenced in the fact that the Broncos are 5-1 in their last 6 games.
Yeah, it's been really cool to watch Bo just be able to develop over the course of this season so far. And obviously you mentioned Baltimore's defense, which the run game defensively has been awesome, but it's that pass defense that has really given the Ravens issues. And so for Bo Nix, if he can get Cortland Sutton going early, you know, if he can get a couple guys kind of in the groove, we have seen time and time again this Ravens defense in that secondary kind of fold. And usually when you talk about rookie quarterbacks with this Ravens defense, sometimes they struggle. In fact, a lot of the time they struggle because of all the looks that they can throw at a young quarterback. But it feels different this season. And for Bo Nix, I mean, obviously that's a very good sign for him. And I know that, again, the passing offense in Denver, you know, in the 20s in terms of net yards per attempt. The rushing offense, though, you look at Denver's rushing offense and you got they're 13th. You know, they're kind of middle of the pack, 4.5 yards per attempt. So somewhat of a balanced group over there. But Javonte Williams there always intrigues me. And I know that, you know, in Denver, they've been like, okay, is this the year? Is this the game? Is this the month that Javonte breaks out? I mean, what has Denver's running game looked like this season? And has Javonte been a guy that Denver can rely on, or are they still waiting for that to pop up?
Well, they've got 6 straight games with over 100 yards rushing, which for the Broncos, after the way the season started, that's really good news because the running game was non-existent for the first 2 weeks. And Javonte specifically has seemingly had we're on almost like a pattern of like 2 bad games, 1 or 2 good games, 2 bad games, 1 or 2 really good games. It just so happens that he's had a bad game most recently here for the Broncos against the Panthers, where I mean, the running game wasn't really doing much. Javonte dropped a pass that could have been a big gain down the right sideline. So not necessarily his worst game by any means, but it's one of those situations where I don't think they've been able to really rely on him. I think you saw a lot of fantasy football people with that Thursday night matchup against the Saints where he scored 2 touchdowns. So they're like, the 1 week I put Javonte Williams on the bench. You know what I'm saying? He's kind of that guy, I would say, in terms of just how he's been, utilized this season and how effective he's been throughout the course of the season. So he's still kind of in that realm of what are you getting from Javonte on a weekly basis? Is he going to be that guy that's dragging tacklers around, or is he going to be a guy that, man, he lets one thing snowball into the next, like a fumble turns into a dropped pass, turns into a misblocking assignment, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's just been one of those years for Javonte.
Yeah. And again, I think if Denver wants to establish something on offense, you got to get the ground game going in some way, shape, or form. And if that pattern is anything, does he go back to having a good game for the Ravens' sake? Hopefully not. For Denver's sake, obviously that's the hope. But let's move over to defense there because this unit has just been absolutely unreal, led by a whole heck of a lot of players. I mean, they're the best passing defense in the NFL. They're a top 5 rushing defense as well. Obviously, I think the guy you think of in this Denver defense just from afar is Pat Surtain and just what he's been able to do over the course of his career, particularly this season. But really, it's not just him. And Sayre, it's not necessarily guys that, are these household star names. They're getting production from everywhere on that group. So for defensively, Denver-wise, what's the biggest storyline here?
Well, it's the anonymous crush, as John Gruden so lovingly dubbed them a couple of weeks ago. The anonymous crush, guys that are kind of just bringing pressure from all angles. The Broncos lead the NFL with 181 total pressures, according to PFF, through the first 8 weeks of the season, and they're getting pressure from everybody. Nick Bonito has a sack in 6 straight games. Zach Allen has played incredibly well this season. John Franklin Myers, who they got in a trade from the New York Jets, has been an outstanding pickup. DJ Jones playing well. Malcolm Roach, Jonathan Cooper, kind of trying to go sack for sack there with Nick Bonito. So everything is really working off of that defensive front 7, which is so much tougher than it was a year ago, where the Broncos are getting just blown off the ball consistently in almost every game that they played. Now they have a way to not only match physicality, but I think they take pride in really out physicaling, if I can say it that way, the opposing offensive line. They want to be more physical than the opposing line, and that has led to a lot of success for, like you mentioned, that number 1 ranked pass defense. Brandon Jones been very good, Riley Moss been very good, and of course Pat Surtain leading the way with 3 picks.
Yeah, and I know that especially when you're talking about rushing the passer against this Ravens team, it's just different rushing Lamar than it is rushing really any other quarterback. Obviously, you got to have discipline in there, but man, Denver's defense has impressed me. And I think, again, if you can slow down any one aspect of this Ravens offense and you can make them kind of go to something different, it's a pick your poison offense. But honestly, for Denver, it's a pick your poison defense because they've been so good in almost every single facet. But coming up in the second part of the show, we are going to be diving into the Ravens side of things, how they match up with the Denver Broncos in this Week 9 game. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot to get to on this crossover edition of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Broncos. First of the show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot made just for super fans like you, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are last to leave. We see you. And you know what else gave me a bit of Ravens fan fuel this week? The moment when Diontae Johnson was traded over to the Ravens. I mean, I'm super excited for that. Hopefully he's able to get in the end zone soon for this Ravens team. They certainly need that. But 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5-Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com. It ships nationwide. We are back. Our second segment of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Broncos. Kevin Oestreicher of Locked On Ravens still here with Sayre Bedinger of Locked On Broncos. And Sayre, we talked about the Broncos side of things in the first part of the show, offensively, defensively. Flipping over to the Ravens side of things, the biggest storyline for Baltimore has to be the acquisition of Diontae Johnson. He was practicing on Wednesday with the team. Obviously, at the time of this recording, we don't know for sure if he's going to play or not. But if, Amari Cooper in Buffalo sets a precedent, DeAndre Hopkins in Kansas City sets a precedent, I'd probably bet that he plays, maybe not a full complement of snaps. But on the offensive side of the ball, Diontae Johnson gets acquired from Carolina with a 6th-round pick for a 5th-round pick. So essentially, it was a free dump for Carolina, and Baltimore gets the benefit of that. For the Ravens, they've had Zay Flowers as their number 1 receiver who's been playing really good football this season. Rashad Bateman has really come on for them. Didn't have a great game last week with a couple of big drops, but overall, his season has been pretty spectacular based off of the expectations for him. So Diontae Johnson kind of slots in that number 3 role. And while, again, expectations are he's going to come in here and catch 10 passes a game for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, I think the Ravens had issues with their receiver depth outside of their top 2. It was Nelson Aguilar's their 3, guys like Tylan Wallace is their 4. And Diontae Johnson couldn't stop raving about the Ravens when he came in here. There's this viral video of him saying, I'm going to show you. And he was on the phone getting ready to come to Baltimore. And then he's talking about how he's willing to do whatever the team needs him to do, and going from, where he was in Carolina, which admittedly, Sarah, you played him last week. It's just it's a dumpster fire over there. Yeah. And now you're coming to Baltimore. It's a different vibe. He's back in the AFC North now too, after spending a handful of years with the Steelers. So a lot of people are excited about the move. Now, some people are not excited about it because it's not a defensive player. And like we kind of trickled in there in the first part of the show with the Denver offense, the Baltimore defense certainly needs some reinforcements, but it's going to be interesting because you have a very talented Denver secondary. And it's not just Diontae Johnson, but obviously not even receiver-wise. What about tight ends, right? Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, you got to account for. Denver certainly has personnel to match up with everything, but this pick-your-poison offense just added another weapon in Diontae Johnson. And if anything, if the defense can't stop any other opposing offense, I guess the Ravens are just trying to outscore everybody 51-50 and call it a day.
Yeah, it's scary hours for anybody that's going to game plan defensively against the Baltimore Ravens. It already was, right? When you're going up against Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, just a dynamic of, hey, if they're in their run game situations, like you're already kind of dead fish in a barrel, right? And now you add all these weapons in the passing game where the Ravens are just executing at such a high level. I believe they have the highest average yards per pass attempt in the NFL. So it's not like they're just out there dinking and dunking down the field. This is an explosive offense with playmakers that can create after the catch as well. And I think that's what Broncos fans are looking at this and they're saying, why not us, man? Why not us? We need one of these guys on the offensive side. But defensively, it creates very interesting, like you said, kind of personnel, guy by guy matchups here. When you talk about the corners for Denver going up against that receiving group, as well as like what player is going to be on Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews, and how are the Broncos going to deal with that? So I find this to be a very interesting storyline when you talk about the Ravens' weapons against what Denver brings to the table, because they are healthy for the most part in terms of that secondary and the linebacker group, which now should feature Quan Alexander out there in the starting lineup. So how do those Ravens playmakers match up against Denver's cornerback group, which has been very good this year, a little grabby at times, but very good? That's going to be fun to see.
Yeah, and I remember, and for Locked On Ravens every day, they're probably sick of me telling this story. I've told it like probably every week since it came out last year. But Peter King went to Ravens training camp last offseason, and that was when Zay Flowers was a rookie. And he wrote about Zay Flowers. He said, the only 2 ways you're going to stop this guy is if you tackle him to the ground or if you hold him. And that's kind of the way he runs his routes, his suddenness. And now with Diontae Johnson in the fold, you have 3 really great separators, 3 really great route runners against the Denver secondary that can certainly hold their own and has done that for the entirety of the season. So I'm looking forward to that. And one more quick note on the offensive side of the ball, because I think we have to mention Lamar Jackson did not practice on Wednesday. John Harbaugh classified it as a rest day, but then the injury report came out and it is back in knee issues for Lamar. So again, probably was a rest day, just to, heal him up. The Ravens have a quick turnaround after this Denver game on Sunday. They play Cincinnati at home on Thursday Night Football. So the Ravens have their bye week very late in the season. So this doesn't necessarily shock me. There wasn't anything that looked off with Lamar coming out of Sunday's game against Cleveland. I'm not really concerned about this whatsoever, but obviously when your star quarterback misses practice, you kind of have to mention it, or else, you're kind of doing a disservice there. So I'd expect them back at practice on Thursday, but just to mention it. And then the other injuries, Keaton Mitchell practiced in full. He's designated to return. I wouldn't expect him back this week for the Ravens. I'd probably expect him either next week or the following week. So Denver's defense probably won't have to worry about him. But on the offensive side of the ball, really nothing else for the Ravens, but defensively, Marlon Humphrey missed last week's game. He was limited on Wednesday. Possibility he plays this week, and obviously it'd be a big get to get him back because he's been their best cornerback by a pretty wide margin this season. And I know Courtland Sutton has had some up and down weeks, but he's played great this season. And, kind of greedily, he's the guy that I've been targeting for Baltimore for past couple of seasons. And I'm just like, come on, just send him over here. But obviously Denver has no reason to with the way they're playing right now. But Marlon was limited. Travis Jones, who's probably one of their best interior pass rushers right alongside Nnamdi Madubuike, he was not practicing with an ankle injury. And then you have other guys like Brent Urban, who did not practice with a concussion, and Michael Pierce, their other defensive lineman, was placed on injured reserve on Wednesday. So Baltimore is very, very thin on the interior of their defensive line. That's probably the biggest storyline for Baltimore's defense, if we're not talking about how terrible the secondary has been and how many dropped interceptions they had against Cleveland on Sunday. I mean, that's probably the biggest one. But again, Denver's offensive line is probably going to be playing a very depleted interior on the defensive front for the Ravens. And obviously, what that could mean is, you talked about that bad, good flip for Javonte. Does that mean Javonte can get sprung? Can guys get to the second level easier? And for Bo Nix, does that mean that he'll have more time to throw in the pocket? Because Baltimore's pass rush has also been non-existent. And obviously, if you're a rookie quarterback, or just any rookie quarterback, the more time, the better, because you don't want things to be overcomplicated, despite how good or bad these guys can be. And I think Bo has, exceeded my expectations for the start of this season. I think if he gets time in the pocket to throw and the ability to go through his reads and not feel pressured or under duress, that could be scary hours for the Ravens, because while Bo has had some low lows of this season, he's also had some very high highs.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where you get into like what we saw last week against Carolina, where Bo struggled with footwork 2 weeks ago, kind of wasn't setting his feet on some of the easy throws against the New Orleans Saints, wasn't necessarily trusting his eyes when guys are kind of coming open in the progression. And we saw a drastic kind of turnaround against the Carolina Panthers in the following game. And we saw him kind of he was just dialed in, just locked in from the start of that game. The Broncos' pass protection has been very good for the majority of the season, I would say, outside of maybe the first week or two of the year where they gave up some pressure. Bo Nix has 3 games already where he hasn't taken a single sack. And that's obviously a credit to not just the offensive line, but his escapability. But we finally did see over the course of the month of October just his willingness to stay in the pocket, not necessarily always be looking to run at the first sign of pressure, but really be willing to stay in the pocket, look at through his progressions and hit the open receiver with confidence, just drive the ball through the shoulder pads. And so if the Ravens allow him to sit back there, he's still getting paid to play. He's a rookie quarterback. He may make the occasional bad throw, but it kind of adds a little bit of wrinkle of intrigue to this overall matchup, that there is sort of an area like an Achilles heel there for the Ravens defense that the Broncos, oddly enough, you wouldn't think based on what people said going into the season, but maybe throwing the ball could allow them to come into Baltimore and maybe pull something off.
Could be. And I know for the Ravens defense, they are looking for a bounce back because they had a gauntlet of quarterbacks over their first 7 weeks of the season. And, Zach Orr is a new defensive coordinator. It's his first time ever calling plays, high school, college, pro. He has no experience. It's been certainly a learning curve, but, they made Jameis Winston look like prime Lamar Jackson out there on Sunday. And if you do the same to Bo Nix, I think you have much deeper issues at this point. It's nothing against Bo Nix, obviously. It's just like, if a rookie quarterback can do that to a defense that, could have Marlon Humphrey back, has Kyle Hamilton, Brandon Steele, like all these guys, what else? And plus there's drama with Marcus Williams, who declined an interview request on Wednesday by the media, who was active for the game on Sunday, did not play a single snap. John Harbaugh said it was an internal type situation. And whenever you hear the words internal, it's never good. It's never good. There's always some sort of drama probably associated with that. So we don't even know what's going on with Marcus Williams. Eddie Jackson had one of the worst games in Ravens franchise history on Sunday, replacing him. So in the secondary, they have all sorts of issues as well. So maybe a get-right game against the Broncos, but nobody underrate this Denver team, please. Because, again, we have seen teams go in and they might not have had high expectations coming into the season. Sometimes, while I think Baltimore's roster is, especially on offense, more talented than Denver's, Baltimore can sometimes play down to competition. So it's something you have to keep an eye on because they did it literally last week. It's not like we haven't seen it in a while. Literally less than a week ago, Baltimore did exactly that. But coming up with the final part of the show, we're going to be diving into keys to victory. What are things that both the Ravens and the Broncos need to do in order to pull off a win in week 9? Plus, we'll get into some mini predictions and a lot more. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot coming up on this edition of both Locked On Ravens and Locked On Broncos. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So to get 100 in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, do live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. We're started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste 100. Make every moment more. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And this show is sponsored by Bilt. All right, real talk. We've all been there. Maybe you're feeling like you're stuck in the loop of rent payments or like you're burning cash with those rent checks. It's frustrating, right? But here's the deal. Bilt Rewards has figured out a way to make rent more rewarding. Take them out of the money bonfire and hello to a renter's revolution with Bilt. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent every month. Pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or a hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards a future rent payment that are designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's JOINBILT.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. All right, back here on Locked On Ravens and Locked On Broncos. Kevin Ostreicher and Sayre Bedinger still rocking out with you here, talking a little Ravens-Broncos Week 9 matchup. Just as a reminder that this crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Sayre, let's get into some predictions. There we go. Let's get into some predictions for this, but let's start off first with some keys to victory. So you're the away team. I'll give it to you first. What are 3 things that Denver has to do in order to win this game?
Well, number one, and it's a key every single game for the Denver Broncos, is find a way to make the opposing quarterback's life miserable. And that, like you said earlier, going to be very difficult to do against Lamar Jackson, bordering on impossible given his skill set, but maybe not if he's hurt going into this game. We'll see, but still a tough task nonetheless, because 75% of Lamar Jackson is probably more athletic and a crazier playmaker than the Broncos will see all year at the quarterback position. So number one is try to make the opposing quarterback's life miserable. In this case, you're trying to do it against just a guy who's probably about to win his 3rd MVP award, right? So that's the number one thing. Number two, your guys got to go make plays for the quarterback. Bo Nix had 4 total touchdowns against the Carolina Panthers, and still the Broncos left a number of huge plays out there on the field. 3 touchdowns dropped by receivers. So another couple of fumbles last week. Can't have that, and that leads to key number 3. Do not make mistakes. Do not turn the ball over. Don't be fumbling the ball trying to gain extra yards. Don't be losing the football when you're getting pressured from behind if you're Bo Nix. Take care of the football. Let this be at least a 1-possession game going into late in the 4th quarter and give yourself a chance to win. Don't let the Ravens, put their foot on the gas from the very early portion of this game and not look like you belong. The Broncos need to look like they belong in this kind of a game, Kevin, because ultimately since Super Bowl 50, they really haven't belonged in games like this.
Yeah, and I think for a Denver team, I like your analogy of playing with house money. And it's not saying that Denver, everyone just, oh, they're just a fun little team, and they're really not this. No, they're a good team. Like, this is a good Denver team that is exceeding all expectations this season. But I like that Denver plays free, and at least it looks like they've been doing that for the majority of the season. On the Baltimore side of things, I think there is a little bit of pressure because of the expectations that they have and the way that they lost to the Browns. So the first thing for the Ravens is just do the little things. Do the little things. And by that, I mean, obviously catch interceptions or just passes when they are in your hands. Penalties have been an issue for the Ravens throughout the majority of the season. And that's another thing where a big penalty can absolutely stall out a drive. And we've seen that multiple times for the Ravens this season. It has cost them in big moments. And again, it's almost like they beat themselves in a lot of different games. They certainly did it on Sunday against Cleveland. Not that Cleveland didn't go out there and play hard and do enough to win. They obviously did. But the Ravens made mistake after mistake after mistake. So if you do the little things, mistakes are less likely to come to you. And so that's the first thing for the Ravens. Number two, I would say don't go too far away from who you are. I know that a lot of Ravens fans are upset with the way that Derrick Henry was utilized on Sunday, only 11 carries in that Week 8 game against Cleveland. Cleveland was stacking up the box and making sure that if the Ravens did run with Derrick Henry, it was going to be a lot more difficult. But if you are shown that looks, something that Baltimore did against the Commanders, for example, is the Commanders sold out everything to stop that run. And Baltimore used play action so perfectly in that game because if you're going to put 7 or 8 in the box, you just use play action, draw those guys in, and then you can plop it over their heads to the tight ends. Or you can go one-on-one with the wide receivers. So we saw against Cleveland, Todd Monken got super cute with the offense. 4th and 1 early. You have Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. You put Lamar Jackson out wide and have Derrick Henry run a wildcat play. That just takes away the element of Lamar Jackson because you always have to account for him. And on that play, Cleveland didn't. You have a 3rd and 1 in a key moment in the game, and you put your 3rd string tight end, Charlie Kohler, under center, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay. And then he false starts, and it's 3rd and 6 all of a sudden. So just stick to what you are and stick to what you know has gotten you there. That's number 2. Don't get too cute with the entire thing. And then finally, how the Ravens are going to win this game is their defense has to bounce back, particularly the pass rush and the secondary. It's as simple as that. You have to get pressure on Bo Nix, make him uncomfortable, speed up that internal clock for a young player. That will help the Ravens force turnover-worthy throws. Now, will they actually be turnovers? We will see. The Ravens apparently had all their defensive backs after practice on Wednesday at the Jugs machine. They were putting in extra work, rightfully so, after the display we saw against the Browns. But, man, this feels like a game with Denver's defense and Baltimore's offense. Like, that's the matchup I'm just so looking forward to. It's, it's like the immovable object you got, and then you got the unstoppable force. Like, which one is going to come out on top between those two? I'm super pumped for it. And I think this game, Sayre, could be one that comes down to the wire and might be a bit better of a game than some people are thinking it could be right now.
Yeah, what's the line on this game? 9.5 points as far as I last saw on FanDuel. So that's the biggest spread of the week out of any of the games, which is kind of crazy to me because I believe the Jaguars go to Philadelphia as well. So the Broncos are not getting any respect after their month of October, but that's okay. I think that they're a team that really has to prove it, especially against a team like Baltimore that, like, you know what? This is a Ravens team coming off of a loss. I'm sitting there all Sunday like, please don't lose this game. I do not want the Ravens coming off of a loss. You want to be the team that, beats them. And because this is not a team that loses 2 in a row very often. I know we saw it early this year, but it felt way more like an outlier than anything else. I just think for the Broncos, proving that you belong in a game like this is critical. Even win or lose, this is a game that you come in, you go to Baltimore with a rookie quarterback. Sean Payton is obviously very experienced in games like this. The coaching staff is veteran laden. These guys know what they're doing. Can these young players go out and execute, or will the moment be too big for them? Can they prove that they belong in games like this in January, hopefully this year, as the Broncos currently the 5th seed in the AFC, but a lot at stake here, obviously, against a team in the Ravens. It's also competing right now for one of those top seeds in the AFC as well.
Yeah. Is Tyler Beatty coming back this week? Do you know?
No word on Tyler Bidet now, apparently, which is
Bidet.
We all found that out in his breakout game against the Buccaneers. We found out that he pronounces it Bidet now. But he wasn't. There was no report as of Wednesday's practice of whether or not he was coming back. So he should be eligible. But it was a pretty scary injury that he suffered against the New York Jets. So I wouldn't be shocked, especially with the Broncos having their top three of Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime's out there. I wouldn't be surprised if Bidet gets another week or two.
All right. Well, I brought it up because if he does come back, maybe no revenge games, please. From the Ravens side of things, Tyler Bidet and Ben Powers is another guy who signed over there. Big money deal for Ben. How's he been doing over there?
He's been great. He's been doing really well. That whole offensive line has been killing it, and he's a huge part of that. Playing next to Garrett Bowles, he's really helped solidify that interior, which has been just kind of locking things down. So we love having him. He's been a huge help for a team that can't draft and develop those guys as well as the Ravens have through the years.
Yeah, he earned that money 100% after the year he had in Baltimore, and I'm glad for him that he's been able to parlay that into a nice little Denver stint so far. But Sayre, should be a really good game on Sunday, and I think that for these two teams, both at 5-3, both in the playoff hunt, man, a lot of implications in this game. Because by the way, if Baltimore loses, they will have 4 AFC losses through 9 weeks, which you don't want to have that. That's not great, especially when it comes down to actually playoff time and getting seeding for the postseason. Really appreciate Sayre and his Broncos insight. Should be a really good game between Baltimore and Denver. Obviously, hopefully Baltimore pulls this one out, but that Denver defense is no joke, but the Ravens offense is no joke either. Now for the defense, they have to get on their game in order to defeat this Denver team. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in today. On the way out, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form. We're almost to 9,000 subscribers on YouTube. Really appreciate all of the support. And also in audio form, be sure to follow along, subscribe over there. The support in audio form has been amazing as well. Coming up tomorrow, we're rounding out the weekday episodes with more Ravens talk, getting into potential trades that could happen. Obviously, continuing to preview the Ravens and Broncos Week 9 game. So be sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.